Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at this breakaway session on fundraising, and thanks for your attendance at the Asia for Animals 2021 conference. My name is Craig. I work for Asia for Animals Coalition. I'm currently the coordinator for farmed animals. I've been with the coalition for 2 years. Before that, I was working for one of our member organizations, actually, Animals Asia, in a global remit for fundraising, particularly for major gifts. So in both of those roles, I have interest in grant programs and grant making organizations, but also in global fundraising strategies. And both of those elements will be covered by two great speakers today. So we have Amit Kaushik, who is the Deputy Director of Fundraising for Greenpeace Southeast Asia. Welcome, Amit. And Amit is based in beautiful Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We also have Scott Green here, who's the founder of Chay, if you'll forgive my pronunciation there, based in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Amit has worked in senior fundraising roles for 17 years, developing and executing strategies. And as I said, he's now the Deputy Director of Fundraising for Greenpeace SEA. He has also pursued a general management program for IIM Bengaluru, and he's also an engineering graduate. Scott is, as I said, the founder of Chay in Vietnam. It's the largest vegan advocacy organization there. He is British, and he is a graduate of design and branding. He's been a teacher, and he has lived in Vietnam since 2011. So yeah, without too much further ado, I'd like to introduce their talks. I'd just like to let you know that we will, first of all, hear from Amit, and then we'll go straight into Scott's talk. And after that, we'll open up the floor to a Q&A. So yeah, let's first of all hear from Amit Kaushik of Greenpeace Southeast Asia. Thank you.
My name is Amit, and today I have privilege to speak in the fundraising session on a topic which is very important in the current scenario, that is fundraising for organization sustainability. So maybe just to start with the picture on the screen, it's a beautiful example of what sustainability does, how important it is for any organization's growth. So at a point of time when a small seeds needs a lot of nurturing, and as soon as it becomes a tree, it is able to, in most of the cases, provide food, water, and sunlight for itself. And that's what we expect from fundraising to do for the organization. So I start with thanking all of you for joining us in today's session. So I want to start with discussing three scenarios which have become very important in the current situation, and especially in 2020, where many organizations struggled to generate consistent income for their programs. And the current scenario or the situation is going to continue at least in 2021 and 2022. So very important to discuss that today. So organization A is the organization which is largely funded by corporate and major donors, but in the current scenario is facing a challenge of sustaining its program because there is an economic slowdown in the market. Organization B has a strong base of individual donors, but has to spend a very high maintenance cost to retain and upkeep the donors. A positive problem, but important to solve. Organization C has a strong face-to-face and events-based fundraising setup, but in the current situation is struggling to raise funds because of the limitations offered because of external factors. So let's go by one. A very important message. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is mystery, but today is a gift, and that's why it is called the present. Thanks to Master Ugwe. And this has directly reference to the context when many organizations are funded by corporate donors who gave last year, but we are not yet sure that they will be giving us this year or maybe the next year. We never know. Same as major donors and foundations. They have given a big gift last year, but we are not sure they will continue to give in this year and next year. And that's where the dependency or reliability of individual donors who contribute small amounts, but they contribute every month, every year. So individual donations have become more important in the given scenario because they are less volatile. For most of the countries in South and Southeast Asia, there has been a drop of individual donors due to economic slowdown and individual facing financial constraint at their end. But the drop is very insignificant, 10 to 15%. Most of the donors have continued to give because they believe in the cause and they believe their small donation will make a large difference. Along with that, individual donations are unrestricted. They allow organizations to do many other things than funding the programs. While corporate donations or major donations come with the restriction and limitation to be utilized only for a certain project. Individual donations can be utilized for planning, for testing new ideas, for developing new concepts, which are very, very important in the given dynamic scenario. Another aspect, while organizations want to develop an individual fundraising program, but what is important to develop an individual donor base to acquire quality donors, the donors who commit to give for many, many months or years to come. And that can only be possible by providing a good donor service. ensuring these donors receive regular communication from the organization. So moving to the next scenario where the organization is supported by a large base of donor, but then you have to bear the cost of maintaining this donor base. It's a pain. And then sometimes you feel that it's not a very exciting story to start with. But how do you deal with that situation in the current scenario? And in the years to come, that is going to bring the bigger change. So, upgrade as a program for the donors who basically have been acquired. It is important to engage, whether it's about sending them regular communication, inviting them for events or online events, webinars, setting up interactive sessions with your board members, organizing donor surveys to take feedback about programs and activities, or the kind of communication they want to receive from the organization, helps to retain and upgrade these donors to a higher value donation. And most of us know that the donors who upgrade, they stay with the longer, they stay longer with the organization, thus contributing to a higher lifetime value and bringing in more return on investments. So it is important to upgrade the donor within first 12 months of acquiring the donation or acquiring them. Important aspect of upgrade program to get higher and best conversion results is to segment them. Have a segmented approach based on age, because younger donors are volatile, mid-age donors can give for longer years, and elderly donors, maybe they give big money, but then they offer a less tenure for their donation. So it's important to segment while we upgrade. And another segment is based on the donation size. If a donor who is given a small, but most probably will give a big amount in the second or third upgrade. So it's very important to segment your donor base and then do the upgrade program. So third one is a scenario where organizations have a comfort zone. They're heavily dependent on one specific channel. It can be corporate fundraising, it can be face-to-face fundraising, or it can be event-based fundraising. But if you only do what you can do, you will never be better than what you are. And that's right. That's the reason it's very important and critical to diversify the fundraising program. Maybe not from day one, maybe after testing few channels, but it is important to diversify in two ways. One, diversify the type of donor which come into the organization. Even in corporate donations, look at CSR, that is project based funding, or cause related marketing, or sponsorship, or employee giving, not only limiting for one kind of corporate commitment. Similarly, for major donors or major donors foundations, asking them to contribute to multiple projects, not only one specific project. Asking them to contribute their time as well. Volunteer for your organization is also important. And then, as mentioned earlier, individual donors, both one-off and regular, are important. Regular are more important because after a few years, a strong base of regular donors can continue to fund the organization without making additional investment into acquiring new donors. And that's how provide sustainability for the organization. Another kind of diversification is channels, because certain fundraising channels don't work in each market. Certain fundraising channels have a lifetime. They stop performing after a certain number of years. Certain number of fundraising channels, certain type of fundraising channels need more investment than others. And some organization cannot make that commitment to start with. So it's very important for the organization to choose channels which will give them the best outcome against the investments they are making, both in terms of money, time, and efforts. So face to face has door to door events, street pitching. It offers a low investment to start with, but high volume to bring in for the new donors. But there is a challenge that it might bring lower quality donors, which might leave the organization earlier. So it is important, along with face to face, to maybe build a telemarketing program. It could be a cold telemarketing program, which is restricted in some of the markets in South and Southeast Asia. So you can start with a telemarketing program based on lead generation through digital activities or through face to face. Another important channel which is growing rapidly and has become very important since 2020, when most of the offline activities were stopped, is digital. Social media fundraising through Facebook and Instagram has reached to very high levels for most of the organizations. Email marketing, display ads, online events, and crowdfunding. There are many ways of raising funds through digital. Television, though it is a high investment, upfront investment channel, but has a very good return on investment in the long term. So direct response television, DRTV, telethons, which are normally used for emergency appeals, give very good results given the right ecosystem. Bring very good quality donors compared to all the other channels. Last but not the least, direct mailer. Many organizations have stopped using them, but many organizations continue to use direct mailer as a very strong channel, just by ensuring that they're targeting the right audience through that. This list is not exhaustive. There are many other channels and forms of diversification which can be tested, and organizations should test them while they are bringing good revenue from one specific channel to ensure they develop a sustainable fundraising program for future. So there is no secret, and there is no secret ingredient for fundraising. What is important, that organizations believe that fundraising can give long term results if we are able to diversify at the right time, if we are able to provide good quality donor service, and if we basically don't rely on big donors, we diversify our risk, okay, by expanding it to expanding our donor base in the initial years. So thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for listening. Have a good session ahead. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Amit Kaushik of Greenpeace Southeast Asia. And special thanks go to the wisdom from the characters from Kung Fu Panda there, which is an appreciated little bit of light relief. So yeah, thanks. A great session. As I said, we will take a question and answer after we hear the next speaker, Scott Green. And I'd like to remind users of the platform that on the left-hand side, you can see a button that says Ask a Question. So we encourage you to do so, please. And yeah, without stopping, we're just going to go straight in and hear from Scott Green from Song Tung Chay, Vietnam. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to you all. I've been asked to talk today about fundraising and share how I've been able to turn my passion in working for animals into a full-time career working to help raise awareness of the rights of farmed animals in Vietnam and encourage Vietnamese citizens to choose plant-based foods. First of all, I'm honored to be involved in an event with so many inspiring people working for change. Making this dream a reality involved a lot of perseverance, mistakes, and some fortune. With all those things considered, I was able to create Vietnam's largest vegan advocacy organization. We now have 2 full-time staff, 4 part-time staff, and around 10 volunteers. We've been featured on national television twice. We interviewed esteemed Dr. Michael Greger. We organized Vietnam's largest vegan festival, and in under a year have had 4,000 people sign up for our plant-based challenge.
Chào các bạn, hôm nay mình muốn giới thiệu đến các bạn một thử thách sẽ giúp cho các bạn khỏe hơn, tiết kiệm hơn và còn bảo vệ cả môi trường nữa. Đó chính là Vegan
Sign up for our plant-based challenge.
Chào các bạn, hôm nay mình muốn giới thiệu đến các bạn một thử thách sẽ giúp cho các bạn khỏe hơn, tiết kiệm hơn và còn bảo vệ cả môi trường nữa. Đó chính là Vegan Challenge, thử thách ăn thuần chay trong 7 ngày. Vậy chế độ ăn thuần chay là gì? Đó chính là chế độ ăn hoàn toàn từ thực vật, không chỉ loại bỏ thịt, cá mà còn cả trứng, sữa bò và cả mật ong nữa. Vậy thì tại sao chế độ ăn thuần chay lại có ích như vậy? Chỉ với một ngày ăn thuần chay, các bạn đã có thể giảm được 4.400 lít nước, tương đương với 1.162 tô phở, 20 kg ngũ cốc, tương đương với 533 ổ bánh mì và gần 10 kg lượng khí nhà kính, tương đương với 5 chiếc xe hơi trong 1 tiếng. Chưa kể sẽ giúp bạn cảm thấy khỏe hơn, tránh được các bệnh tim mạch, tiểu đường và hỗ trợ giảm cân nữa. Ngoài ra, bạn còn bảo vệ mạng sống của một sinh vật nữa đó.
Today I'd like to share some insights to hopefully inspire you to fundraise as a grassroots organization or individual and help bring your project to life. In my case, it all started in 2017 when me and some friends decided to devote our Sunday afternoons to street-based activism, showing slaughterhouse footage on laptops and tablets, encouraging people to see the harsh realities of factory farming. We also worked with the animal save movement, and with a bit of persistence, we managed to find a slaughterhouse that gave us permission to visit. With social media, we were able to capture people's interest in our message, but the conversation soon changed to nutrition or cultural issues. I soon realized there weren't any useful or credible resources for people to learn more about veganism, animal rights, or the effects of animal agriculture on our planet. A quick Google search for how to be vegan or ăn chay như thế nào either led to a Buddhist website, a restaurant, or some tabloid article involving someone's bad experience with a plant-based diet. I saw this as an enormous problem. The internet played such a huge role in my access to information that it allowed me to learn and change, and I felt this service was just not there for Vietnamese people. Having identified that need, Sống Thuần Chay, or more easily known as STC, was born. I had little experience of working for a charitable organization, let alone directing one. I wasn't aware of any fundraising opportunities or how our work could deliver measurable change. All these things I had to learn while I was supporting myself teaching. But because of our hard work developing STC and building some success, we've been able to earn the trust of funders and adequately fund our activities. That means I've been able to attend online workshops on accounting, workplace management, and effective digital marketing practice to help facilitate my career change. The organizations I'll mention later have access to all these resources. Looking back, I think the most important thing I did was share our activities on social media. That led to a recommendation from a Vietnamese friend in Canada to the grants program director at ProVeg. On the 13th of February 2019, I received a life-changing message in our inbox. ProVeg gave me a great idea of what kind of activities they would like to fund, and so we applied with fingers crossed, and our application was successful. Starting with a small budget, I hired a part-time copywriter and organized the festival. We were able to garner some press attention, and over 3,500 people came. Our social media continued to grow, and we were seeing huge interest in our work. Since then, I've made various connections to people in the animal rights movement who have been tremendously helpful in familiarizing myself with the process of fundraising, developing campaigns and strategies, and generally working in the animal rights movement. I think it's worth stating that the status of farmed animals in Vietnam is way below that of companion animals. The concept of Vietnamese citizens supporting farmed animal charities over human ones is quite strange. So as a result, we're not really comfortable running donation campaigns in the same way as other international organizations can, by including a donation button on their website or running a fundraising campaign on GoFundMe, for example. We have to bear in mind that the average monthly salary in Vietnam is around $300. So we've had to be creative in our fundraising. Well, how do we do this? Well, we offer something in exchange. By using our social media following of around 100,000 followers, we can bring awareness of businesses that align with our core values. They're also willing to offer financial compensation. We also generate funds from organizing events and selling merchandise. I think there's a lot of interest in funding welfare projects in Asia and Vietnam especially. Charity Entrepreneurship offer a course and support that will help you establish one of their programs in Vietnam and will give you lots and lots of free support. Unfortunately, welfare work is quite hard to establish in Vietnam. So for now, we're focusing on individual change, canteen reform, and helping the government to change their nutritional guidelines. If your country is more open to welfareism, you might have access to more funding opportunities. The task is difficult, but I do see change happening. Our main aim for now is to establish an AR movement in Vietnam to allow bigger changes to occur in the future. But there is good news. There are funders out there who are willing to fund projects, be they big or small. In our case, we started with a small grant. In 2020, we became aware of ACE, Animal Charity Evaluators, EA, Effective Altruism, World Animal Protection, and ProVeg. All these organizations offer financial support as well as organizational support to help you transition. Their funding meant I was able to reduce my teaching hours and hire more staff. In 2021, having established connections with other individuals and organizations who wanted to support us, our budget increased so that I was able to devote all my time to Thuan Chay. I would like to reiterate for your benefit that it wasn't me seeking funding, it was funders contacting me and sharing their experience of the animal rights movement in general, to which I wasn't very familiar with. Luckily, you won't have to make the same mistakes I did. So, how did these funding opportunities find me? Well, I became Scott the Vegan. I talked about what I was doing on social media. I shared important information about the vegan movement. I talked about our events. I was an active member in local social media groups. I actively looked for people to help support vigils with the SAVE movement. I looked for people to help aid our Cube of Truth. Generally, I just encouraged people to get involved and help build a community. From this, I soon got the feeling that if anyone wanted to talk about the farmed animal rights movement in Vietnam or Southeast Asia, my contact details were being shared. And within a few months, people from PETA, Mercy for Animals, Animals Asia, the SAVE movement, the Fish Welfare Initiative, Challenge 22 were all reaching out. Much of what we do is not about making people change their dietary habits. It's also about inspiring young Vietnamese people to realize there are opportunities to use their talents to help make the world a better place for animals. If we can change that, then I believe fundraising will be much easier. If you're interested in taking the next step and helping to develop your efforts or transition your group from a grassroots to a more sustainable organization, then personally I'd begin talking to the Pollination Project, who have small grants, ProVeg and Veg Fund, slightly larger. These organizations have plenty of advice on where to start and how to grow. If your dreams are a little bigger and you have some evidence to support your personal or organization's work, then I'd recommend talking to animal charity evaluators, effective altruism, and World Animal Protection. If you're serious about applying for funding, it's good to think in terms of the impact you can make and create a specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-specific plan or SMART plan. Why? Well, this will show the funders looking at your application that you've got a good understanding of your project and whether it's a good investment or not. The criteria are as follows. So specific. What do I want to accomplish? Is it an awareness campaign? Is it an event? Is it canteen reform? Measurable. For example, how many people will you reach? How many people will attend your events? How many animal lives can you save? Achievable. How realistic are these goals? Do you have the human resources to put these into action? Relevant. Is this intervention worthwhile? Will it help you achieve your goals? Is this the best use of your time? Why? And then finally, time. How long will it take you to reach this goal? You can make a main target and sub-targets to help you stay on track and feel a sense of achievement for obtaining your aim. So that's the SMART criteria. A Google search will guide you through a more thorough explanation of the planning process, but I think it's good before you write your application to have this in mind so that you can feel more confident about what you can do with any funding that you might receive. I think it's also good to consider the ability to scale your intervention. Generally, interventions that can impact more animals are more likely to be successful. I feel these are all really important things to consider when you sit down with your colleagues and think about how to use potential funds and to make an impact. I hope you found what I've shared useful. I'm still learning more about fundraising, so I'm no expert, but I'm always open to connecting with similar-minded people, organizations, and I'm willing to share experiences and learn from one another. Thanks again to AfA for inviting me, and thank you all for listening. I'll share my contact details below if you'd like to reach out. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Great. Well, thank you to both speakers again, to Amit and Scott, for some wonderful presentations there. Just before we move on to the Q&A, I'd just like to mention a few things here that occurred to me listening to your talks. So, you know, the AfA Conference has been ongoing since 2001, but this is obviously the first one that has been a digital event. And that means that it might be more accessible this year to members of the public and also to a larger student portion of our audience. So really, this session is intended as a toolkit, not only for grassroots NGOs, which I think was really deeply covered by Scott, and also, you know, really well-established large NGOs, which is really well covered by Amit. But as well as that, you know, there may be people in the audience seeking to get into our movement and they don't really know where to start. So I just wanted to mention that because this session is happening simultaneously with the other breakouts, actually users of this platform can log back in for 7 days and view this. So for the benefit of all those people who may not be here, we'll go through some great questions. And I also just wanted to point out that, you know, if you're thinking about getting into our movement, I would highly recommend visiting the exhibition booths here at the conference and talking to Compassion in World Farming and the Pro-Veg Grants team, who are both here. You can chat live with them. You can also chat live with us at Asia for Animals. We have a stall there as well. And you can also visit like asiaforanimals.com/resources, or if your organization hasn't joined our network yet, you can visit asiaforanimals.com/join-AFA, or as I say, chat to us at the booth. So we hope to provide a toolkit with the question and answers that the gentleman will give. Thanks again for some great presentations. So I'm going to ask a first question of Amit, please. And this is with particular regard to Greenpeace. Amit, you know, Greenpeace has published that it has like a fundraising, kind of strategy that doesn't rely on corporations or governments, because you want to remain independent. And I think that's a really great approach and really necessary for a body like Greenpeace, which is, you know, working across environment, you know, people, planet, and animals. And I just wanted to ask that if that means that your corporate fundraising is diminished, does it mean that Greenpeace relies on more donations from individuals, and how has that played out during the crisis? Have you found that more beneficial during the crisis, or has it been actually more difficult? And you know, thinking of the answer with the benefit of other organizations that may have also had to rely on donations from individuals during this time.
Thanks, Craig. So I'll remove the word more in the context, because it has been difficult, especially in case of Southeast Asia, where you know, we are growing our fundraising program still. And one thing is very, very important, like it's more than the giving capacity, it is also the inclinations of corporates, institutions during the current crisis to maybe stop funding charities they have been funding for a while, has been observed. So while I talk to my other colleagues in other organizations in fundraising, what I hear that long-term fundraising promises were basically kind of called off. So definitely, depending on specifically one particular organization for sustaining operations, has become more challenging in the current scenario. With Greenpeace's strategy, yes, main reason is to stay independent, but it diversifies your risk to a level uh, where we have felt the effect, but it's not more than 5%, specifically for Greenpeace in Southeast Asia, because we have a large donor base of individual donors. We have foundations who support us, but we haven't. These are individual foundations, and that means these people individually believe in the cause. Okay, so it's a slightly different approach when a corporate decides to support a particular cause. They look to align their strategic objectives or their basically inclination for funding particular geography or particular cause. But in case of Greenpeace, it's not the case. Most of the individuals who choose to support Greenpeace have passion towards the environment, have passion towards the cause. And that's where we haven't seen basically a lot of a very big impact. Yes, there is an impact because there is a wider impact across the globe on the organization. So we do feel that we have slowed down, and we will see the slowdown in our fundraising for over next 1.5 to 2 years. But yes, it's absorbed easily because of larger individual donor base. Hope I answered your questions.
Yes, yeah, you did. Thank you very much. And actually, I had a little bit of an add-on question, but I feel that you answered it already. You know, in Greenpeace's Fundraising Values, it's referred to that, you know, you want to remain independent from corporations. And I think that's very relevant to lots of NGOs now. Who, you know, the corporate world is full of, you know, parent company upon parent company. But actually, yeah, you answered that the word corporation can actually refer to a foundation or some, because there may be businesses out there whose values are already truly aligned with Greenpeace, and I presume that you assess on a case-by-case basis whether you can accept gifts from them and whatnot. And if there's been any impact that you can think of around that during this time.
Hope I understood your question correctly. You mean to say that if a organization is funding particular operations in the current scenario, has that been impacted?
No, I just meant that, like, even though your fundraising values say that you want to remain independent from corporations, in fact, that word probably refers to big multinationals, whereas I'm sure there are business entities whose values are really aligned with Greenpeace, who you can still welcome gifts from. Is that clear?
Yes, much clear. I think, but as a principle, we have taken an approach of zero corporate funding.
Okay.
Okay, and that is largely because it's it's difficult to justify to organization where you say, okay, I will take fund, and during the course of time, if they decide to change their priorities because of business, and then for as an organization, it's difficult to go back and say to the believers, the volunteers and the beneficiaries who believe in the organization, that why we have been taking money for so long from a company which now suddenly decided to move for or change their values. So I think that is one. And in a way, thanks to our individual contributors, because as an organization, Greenpeace also advocates for larger level policy changes, which is basically sometimes campaigning with the government, not only the country but also regional, like in Southeast Asia to ASEAN platforms, where we want bigger policy level changes, and they directly or indirectly have an impact on the corporation. So if we talk about stopping single-use plastic manufacturing, so it could have impact on larger business models. So that's where we don't want to come across as an organization which is one side funded by a particular company, on the other side we are basically campaigning or advocating for issues which might have impact on their business interests. So we want to be transparent, and we want to be independent as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for expanding on that point. I have a question now for Scott. Scott, I'm wondering, in a lot of countries in Asia, it might be more difficult if anyone in the audience is thinking about establishing an NGO, because NGOs might be perceived by local governments as being, a threat to the status quo, or a challenge to industry or what have you. And in some countries, it might actually be more easy to set up as an NPO or as a for-profit company. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the process in Vietnam and how you arrived at Thuan Chay, not setting up as an NGO, but actually as a company, and whether that's had any benefits or limitations for Thuan Chay.
Yes, thank you. So that's an interesting question. So when I talk to people about STC, I kind of say that we are a non-profit in spirit. But obviously in the legal side of things, we are a limited for-profit company. So as I realized that there were opportunities for us to expand, like I said, I didn't really know much. It was just, I did these things because it was fun, or I thought it was important. But I'd never realized there was any opportunity for it to grow. So I realized, okay, well, if we need to grow, then I need to be able to give someone that wants to work full time with us a contract. So the only way I could do that would be as a for-profit organization. I did speak with some friends at some of the larger NGOs that operate in Vietnam, which are like foreign-based NGOs. So they've had the money and the resources to go through that process. From my research, I understood that it's actually quite costly, time-consuming, and I figured at this stage in our journey, because, like I said, we're quite a new organization, so we feel like we have a lot of work to do. We have to really prove ourselves, and the work that we're doing is really effective. So I hope that perhaps if we continue on that same trajectory, then we can look at the pros and the cons of becoming an NGO versus a for-profit organization. But yeah, it's not something that the government, from what I understand, it's not something I believe that the government looks upon favorably. just charity work in general. So yeah, we've gone the for-profit route, but I think it's a matter of, for anyone listening, it's a matter of just connecting with other NGOs or other people in your territory and figuring out the best strategy, because what works in Vietnam might not work in Malaysia, it might not work in Indonesia. So it's just a matter of like connecting with people and figuring out, like I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the kind of attitude of the government in each country is going to be so different that it'll be unique. But it's great to hear, and that you've had that experience of setting up as a company, but you still have the vision that in the future you might, take some stock and assess whether going down the NGO route.
Yes.
Yeah.
I noticed that there are some NGOs like similar to us that have like welfare programs and other and like they even have a Synergia operate in Thailand. They run the same plant-based campaign that we do with Challenge 22. They have some welfare campaigns. They have some canteen reform things. And it's interesting because I think like Synergia identified Thailand as somewhere that they could operate in quite easily. Whereas I think a lot of like bigger NGOs looking to expand into Asia have sort of looked at Vietnam and thought it's a bit difficult. So I think like when it comes to like NGOs, you've got like Animals Asia and HSI, sort of like their goals and their strategies are quite different to ours. So yeah, it's tricky, but perhaps in the future when things change, we can look at the pros and the cons of it. Certainly for stability reasons, and experience as well. I think it would be great if we could work with some of the more established NGOs because we're kind of like starting from scratch here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to consider, but like you say, it's about getting to know the actors in your country. Great, thank you. I have a question here for Amit. So Amit, in your talk, you mentioned activities like face-to-face fundraising and events, within the sphere of lots of different types of fundraising activities. I'm thinking about, when grassroots organizations are starting out, I think that they probably tend to think a lot of activities like face-to-face and events that are really about individual donors and like very grassroots style of fundraising. My question is, thinking about your topic, which is about sustainable fundraising, like, do you think that if a group is starting out and it's possible, should they be looking ahead a little bit more at more of the ambitious fundraising strategies that are more sustainable? Or do you think that they should build up in a very like every penny counts sort of very gradual way, like you mentioned at the very start of your talk?
So it's like no size fits all. But I think it's also what is important because initially, obviously, where organizations need to invest a lot is to a large part of their fundraising or the funding goes into funding their programs directly. But what is very, very important that when we develop our fundraising program, we think at least for 3 years minimum. So it's whether it's face to face or whether it's digital or whether it's event based fundraising. I think it's the channel is not important, but the approach to bring more donors than relying on few donors, that is what is important. So some markets it's possible to get volunteers, and I remember in 2018 AfA conference I mentioned the same thing to few of the organizations I was meeting at that point in time as well. That is important, that you can use a volunteer approach to do face to face, which is less expensive than developing a professional fundraising team. But it's basically important that you do it with the intention that this channel is going to bring us more donors, and you keep adding a certain number of donors every month. Maybe it's 100 donors or 200 or 500 donors based on the investments and efforts you're able to make. But within 3 years, you see a donor base of 10 to 15,000 donors who are contributing to you every month. And so basically it's a journey where on the graph, it looks like, okay, you are investing and you're earning the same money back in 6 months. You have a break even on your investment in 6 months. But what you see in 3 years, you have a return on investment of 3 to 4 times. So, and then it is possible because you have some money which is not directly your project funded money or grant money, which is restricted, but then you have money which is unrestricted, which you can invest into developing other fundraising programs as well. So I think it's the approach of diversifying from the beginning with having more and more donors that is more important than the channel.
Absolutely, thank you. That's extremely comprehensive answer. Gentlemen, I'm aware that we only have 5 minutes left of this session, so I'd just like to take one last question for Scott, if I may, and then we'll wrap up. Scott, you've really made a great use of your high level of skill in media and brought this into Songtong Chay as a kind of central driver of its work. For anyone in the audience who hasn't had the chance to familiarize himself with Songtong Chay, I really recommend checking it out on Facebook. You see a lot of great video content there and whatnot. You've also told me in the past how you've been able to upskill some of the people in the Songtong Chay staff and community. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about anyone out there who might examine their own skill set, because the link between skill in media and helping animals is not really obvious. And so how did you look at yourself and say, okay, this is what I'm good at and these are the skills that I can bring to my community? Could you say a little bit about that, please?
That's an interesting question. I don't know where to start. I think using social media, I just felt like, because I think that like I said, we're kind of like in a process of like reverse engineering our organization. We've built something and it's got certain somewhere. And now I'm actually in here today, connected with people from Greenpeace and other established charities. And I'm still learning about the things that they've done and failed at, or the things that they do that have been effective for them. So we're kind of like reverse engineering a little bit. So it's not the best way to do it. But, you know, what we saw was that we were doing kind of cube of truth, save style activism, a real grassroots activism, because like we felt like, well, what else can we do? And, you know, in that 2 or 3 hours, maybe you can connect with 15 people. But then sort of like when I looked at social media, I looked at if I took a video that Peter made and added Vietnamese subtitles to it, then all of a sudden it was reaching 200,000 or 300,000 people, and there were thousands of comments, and basically it all started from what was like, well, how can we have for me, I was thinking like, well, how can we have a vegan movement when there's so much there's such a lack of awareness of nutrition? You know, how does the conversation move forward? You know, like eventually someone is going to try and get for economic reasons or health reasons or ethical reasons, schools are going to try and implement plant-based diets into the schools. And at this moment in time, the Vietnamese parents will not have it. They will riot if their kids aren't served animal products at canteens. They will riot. So I felt, okay, well, at least if we have a website or some kind of organization where people can feel like get some information, like that would be really useful. So yeah, like it's kind of like I say, quite a tricky question. But yeah, like now we're kind of like looking at looking at connecting with other people and learning from other organizations, the kind of work that they do that's relevant to I don't know, communist or socialist country where there are some kind of more limitations. We are looking at kind of integrating people with other skills to try and help us grow. Because obviously, like I speak some Vietnamese, I'm not fluent yet. So that's a huge limit. But you know, while we're operating, we're seeing people connect and they want to help us to grow. So I think, like I said before, like if you want to grow your organization, you have to make people aware of what you're doing, and then eventually, like they'll want to become involved. And at this moment in time, like the idea of young Vietnamese people working for NGOs is quite strange. The parents would be like, no, go and be an accountant, go and be an engineer, go and be a doctor, something more stable.
You know, if a young 20-year-old Vietnamese says, "Oh, I want to work for a pro-vegan advocacy organization," parents would probably tell them to, get out of the house. So yeah, it's a difficult situation, but yeah, we're trying.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you for that. And just on that, to pick up on your last point, just before we close, is that, I've chatted to colleagues from animal advocacy careers before who have done a little bit of study into how serious careers in animal advocacy are taken in the region. And it turns out, quite like you said, not at all, but it's bringing it back to the topic of this session. Grant-making bodies like ProVeg and Compassionate World Farming and the others that you mentioned, Effective Altruism and Charity Entrepreneurs, those who are based not in Asia, but they are making it possible for people to have great and sustainable careers in programs and fundraising, really. So that's great. Okay, well, thank you.
Sure is.
We have to wrap up now, I think, I'm afraid, and I think we go on to a break before the next session. But really wonderful presentations and Q&A, and thank you again to Scott and Amit. And we hope you enjoyed the session. And yeah, okay, thank you, everyone. We'll have a rest of your conference. Please enjoy it. Cheerio.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.